You would think that entering an anomalous, reality-bending dimension would instantly activate a person's primal survival instincts. You would think they would become hypervigilant, ultra-cautious, and profoundly reluctant to do anything stupid. But if cinema has taught us anything, it is that human beings, when faced with cosmic horrors beyond their comprehension, will consistently choose the most baffling, reckless, and outright brain-dead courses of action available to them. We are going to examine every single lapse of judgment, every tactical blunder, and the rare moments of actual intelligence displayed in the movie. This is Every Dumb Decision in the Backrooms. The movie kicks off with a classic found footage vibe. We are looking at a videotape from the 1990s capturing an unseen scientist named Naren Warren. This guy is wandering through the backrooms, documenting the surreal, sprawling emptiness. The place is just a chaotic mess of random furniture scattered across these massive, hollow halls. Naren eventually stumbles into a room overflowing with video and camera equipment. Naturally, he tries to use a radio to call for help, but instead of getting a response from base command, a literal seagull flies out of nowhere. Now, this is where we encounter our very first monumentally dumb decision of the film. After a literal seagull flies into a subterranean, windowless, impossible maze of office furniture, Naren decides that the best course of action is to simply keep walking forward. Let us think about this for a second. You are a trained scientist. You are currently lost in a spatial anomaly where the laws of physics have clearly taken a permanent vacation. Out of nowhere, a terrestrial bird appears in a completely sealed, sterile environment. This is not a charming moment of natural beauty. It is a flashing, neon warning sign that the spatial geometry of this place is highly unstable, leaking, and completely unpredictable. A rational person, or even just someone with a basic level of self-preservation, would immediately stop, evaluate their surroundings, and begin backtracking to the last known safe zone. Instead, Naren treats this reality-shattering avian intrusion like a minor inconvenience and continues strolling deeper into the pitch-black, unexplored corridors. He has no weapon, no defensive strategy, and apparently no concept of situational awareness. He keeps pushing forward into the dark until he comes face to face with a massive creature charging directly at him from the shadows. Only at this exact moment of ultimate peril does he finally decide to look for a way out. This is the classic horror mistake of waiting until the monster is actively trying to eat your face before you bother to formulate an escape plan. Because he wandered aimlessly without mapping his route or keeping his back to a known exit, he finds himself completely cornered, unable to escape, and is violently attacked by the entity. The tape cuts off abruptly, leaving us with a harsh lesson in why you don't casually stroll through haunted, non-Euclidean labyrinths. It is then revealed that this entire tragic sequence was actually being watched on a monitor by Naren's fellow scientists. Cut to the real world, where we meet Clark, a furniture store owner running a struggling business called Cap & Clark's Ottoman Empire. The guy is drowning under the pressure of competing with a massive rival store, and it's taking a toll on his mental health. He visits his therapist, Dr. Mary Klein, a woman carrying her own heavy emotional baggage. She's constantly fixated on the loss of her childhood home and the trauma of her mother being sent away to a mental institution. During their session, Mary tries to get Clark to unpack the issues that ruined his marriage, specifically his severe drinking problem. He has him role-play his domestic arguments, which backfires because Clark just gets incredibly angry and vents his raw frustration. Later, Clark tries to film a commercial for his store with his assistant manager, Kat Taylor, and her boyfriend, Bobby Roberts. It's a total disaster. The moment Clark sits down on one of his own chairs, it catastrophically breaks beneath him. To make matters worse, the store suffers a major electrical issue, forcing Clark to bring in an electrician. They head down into the basement to find the electrical panel, but instead, they discover something deeply unnatural. There are 3 switches placed diagonally across the wall in a configuration that completely defies standard electrical engineering and normal human logic. That night, Clark is staying late at the store, drinking and watching television. Suddenly, the broadcast cuts out and is replaced by a jarring, distorted video clip from the backrooms before the TV goes completely dead. Drawn by a mix of curiosity and dread, Clark goes back down to the basement. That's when he notices a strange, unnatural light bleeding out from behind one of the concrete walls. To his absolute surprise, Clark discovers that he can pass right through the solid structure, and he ends up stepping directly into the backrooms. This is a staggeringly poor choice. You're a civilian in a dark basement. You have just witnessed your television broadcast anomalous footage, and now a solid wall is glowing and lacks physical collision. Normal, survival-oriented human behavior dictates that you run away. You don't treat a tear in the fabric of space-time like a fun walkthrough exhibit at a local museum. You don't just shrug your shoulders and slide into a subterranean dimension of yellow wallpaper and damp carpets. If a wall in your basement suddenly loses its physical properties and starts glowing like a portal to another dimension, you don't walk through it just to see what happens. You call a structural engineer, you call the utility company, or honestly, you just run out of the building and never look back. Stepping through a clipping glitch in reality while completely alone, intoxicated, and without telling a single soul where you're going is an absolute masterclass in how to get yourself erased from existence. But Clark, driven by some bizarre mixture of alcohol-fueled curiosity and a complete lack of common sense, just walks right on through. Once inside, he begins wandering aimlessly through the endless repeating hallways. If you find yourself accidentally clipping into an alternate reality, the very first thing you should do is turn around and walk right back out, the way you came. You establish a baseline. You make sure the door stays open. What does Clark do? In a state of total shock, he wanders deeper into the space. He starts exploring this highly unnatural space. And here's the thing. He's just walking into random rooms without doing absolutely anything to retrace his steps back to the real world. What does he think he's looking for? What is the actual end goal here? You didn't pack food, you didn't pack water, you don't have a weapon, and you're playing explorer in a yellow-tinted purgatory. He sees the dead bird and keeps walking. No survival instincts whatsoever. He didn't even question what killed the bird and how it got there. He finds a room featuring a bizarre, unsettling cardboard cutout of a man accompanied by disembodied voices whispering in a chaotic mix of different languages. He then finds a random small door, opens it, and notices someone's discarded bags and personal belongings just lying there. He opens the bag and finds Naren Warren's research badge. The badge is right there, but the owner is completely missing. Another very obvious red sign that he ignored. Imagine finding a missing scientist's bag in an unknown place. People are even nervous to fly planes with scientists. Clearly, this is a danger zone. Now, any logical person would look at those bags and think the owner of these things is either dead or kidnapped, and considering how fresh the bird was, whatever killed or kidnapped them is probably still lurking nearby, meaning you should leave immediately. But Clark decides the best course of action is to crawl right through that tiny, claustrophobic opening anyway, not knowing where the place leads to. He has no idea what happened to the person who owned that gear, and the deeper he crawls, the more impossible he makes it to retrace his steps back to the real world. He enters another weird room and he starts seeing weird physics-defying anomalies, like shoes literally clipped halfway through the solid walls. He even spots the exact chair that broke during his failed commercial shoot, inexplicably manifest in this dimension. While he's looking around, he hears a weird sound. He goes to look at the area it's coming from, which was the tiny space he crawled from, and sees the cardboard cutout he saw at the beginning being pulled by something, which causes him to back away terrified. He does make a wise decision to run immediately without further investigations. Usually in horror movies, they're dumb enough to want to go back and actually check it out to make sure their eyes weren't deceiving them. But instead of walking over to inspect it like a typical horror movie victim, he turns around and runs immediately. Yes, Clark, finally, some survival instincts. He gets extremely lucky. While fleeing in a blind panic, he follows a completely different door than the one he used to enter, and the layout of the place miraculously transports him right back to the starting area of his exploration, allowing him to escape to his basement. This is a matter of pure luck, because that door could have led him anywhere. Meanwhile, over at the Async Research Institute, a scientist named Phil is sitting in a clean, high-tech control room intently watching the surveillance and expedition footage of Clark exploring the backrooms. Back in the real world, Clark is deeply traumatized and desperate for answers. He goes right back to his therapist, Mary, and desperately tries to explain the impossible dimension he just discovered. Honestly, telling someone about an impossible dimension instead of keeping it entirely to yourself, even if his explanation sounds completely wild, is actually a decently smart decision. Who knows if the government now has a bounty on your head because you discovered their secret lair in one of their scientists? It is a brief moment of sanity where he attempts to seek a second opinion. However, from Mary's perspective, Clark is a severe alcoholic undergoing immense stress, so she logically assumes he's just experiencing vivid, terrifying hallucinations brought on by severe alcohol withdrawal. Clark realizes she does not believe a single word, so Clark resolves to gather physical proof. But this is where his decision-making plunges right back into a deep abyss of stupidity. Despite just running for his absolute life from a highly suspicious and hostile movement in that dimension, Clark decides to recruit his employees to help him gather evidence. Instead of reporting to the authorities, gathering professional recording equipment by himself, or contacting a university physics department, or literally doing anything else that doesn't involve endangering others, he decides to drag his employees into a dangerous supernatural vortex. Bringing innocent people into an undocumented, supernatural danger zone with absolutely zero professional safety precautions is remarkably dumb. He goes out to find Kat and Bobby so he can recruit them to help him gather evidence. Think about the sheer lack of ethics here. You just barely escaped a howling, monstrous entity in a hostile alien dimension, and your immediate thought is to drag your assistant manager and her boyfriend down there without a single piece of protective gear, weapons, or a basic survival plan? He's prioritizing proving his therapist wrong over the literal lives of his staff. He's treating an existential threat to humanity like a high school science fair project, and he's dragging innocent bystanders into the blast radius just to satisfy his own ego. Clark sets up some flimsy hazard tape around the basement wall and brings Kat and Bobby down to show him his grand discovery. They're understandably shocked and deeply unsettled by the impossible entrance cutting through the foundation of the building, but against all environmental cues and basic logic, they follow him straight through the wall anyway. If you say you're taking precautions and carrying a rope, why on earth didn't you tie the rope to the real-world side of the portal to help retrace steps quickly? And why didn't at least one person stay back in the safety of the real-world basement to act as a lifeline or call for help if things went south? Instead, all three of them stepped completely through the wall. This is a collective failure of groupthink. If your boss shows you a portal to a damp, endless maze in the basement of a failing furniture store, you quit your job on the spot. You do not step through the portal. You do not let your boss convince you that wandering into a physical glitch in the universe is a good career move. But they walk right in, completely unprepared for the sheer scale of the danger they're putting themselves in. Once inside, things get incredibly reckless. They decide to conduct a makeshift reconnaissance mission. Bobby ties a rope around his waist and the team lowers him down into a deeper, recessed concrete space. Now, some audience members might consider Kat to be a bit whiny in these scenes, but honestly, I am entirely on her side. She's the only one expressing normal human concern. She's actively questioning the sheer absurdity of passing through solid concrete walls, and is visibly deeply worried about her boyfriend Bobby being descended into some pitch-black, unknown pit he's never seen before. And what is Clark's excuse? He tells her Bobby has to go down because Bobby is the one holding the camera. Let's hold on a minute, Clark. You're the boss. You're the one who dragged these teenagers down here into this mess. If the camera is so important, you should have taken it and gone down into the pit yourself. You have absolutely no idea what kind of horrific risks or lethal situations you're sending this kid into, yet you stand at the top of the ledge acting like a corporate supervisor. And Bobby is also an absolute idiot for just casually accepting this and going along with the plan. He's being lowered into a literal abyss in an alien dimension, and he's joke-making about his potential last wishes. Bro, do you not love your life? Is your survival instinct completely non-existent? Inside this lower level, Bobby finds a massive pile of abandoned, discarded clothing. Bobby looks at these massive, unsettling piles of blood-stained, discarded garments and calls them laundry. What kind of laundry is occurring in the damp, empty depths of a spatial anomaly, Bobby? I certainly don't see a washing machine down there. As he sits through the garments, he recognizes a shirt that looks exactly like the one he had been wearing earlier in the week. To make matters infinitely worse, a lot of the clothes are heavily stained with fresh, dark blood. Now, let's dissect the absolute stupidity of this entire sequence. First of all, lowering your coworker's boyfriend into a dark, creepy pit using a basic rope with zero backup safety measures is already a terrible idea. Then Bobby spots random lights flashing deeper in the dark and decides it's a stellar idea to go walk over and check them out. There's already more than enough evidence and footage. You should have been out of here after seeing that creepy cardboard staring at you. He hears a sound and turns back immediately. At the very least, Bobby does get some major points for his reaction speed. The moment he hears a sound and sees a glimpse of the creature, he does not waste any time. In most horror movies, characters will stand frozen, slowly backing away while giving the monster plenty of time to roar and strike. Bobby, however, gets the hell out of there. He doesn't struggle, he doesn't freeze, and he immediately scrambles back up the rope with the speed and agility of a Navy SEAL. Sadly, his survival skills are cut short by bad luck. He climbs up the rope much faster than Clark and Kat can actually pull the slack up, and while he tries to untie the rope from his waist, immediately, the entity grabs the rope and violently drags Bobby back down. I assume they had a knife. What do you mean you didn't reach for a knife to quickly cut the rope? It's a tragic mechanical error. He had the instinct to survive, but the sheer physics of the situation were against him. It's unfortunate that his survival instincts had to be sacrificed, but we do need our first horror movie victim after all. Clark and Kat try to help him as he's being pulled by the creature, but are pushed into the room. They see blood everywhere, and a creature pulling his screaming, bloody body into a sealed, inaccessible area of the structure. Kat's reaction to this is pure, unadulterated stupidity. With Bobby dragged into the abyss, the absolute worst thing you can do is split up. But that's exactly what happens. Kat, completely consumed by panic and grief, completely ignores the threat and rushes after him into the dark labyrinth. This is a textbook horror movie mistake. Running blindly into pitch-black, hostile, alien environment to chase after someone who was just violently dragged away by a monster is a mission. You have no weapons, no map, and no way to defend yourself. Does she think she can fight off something that took down her boyfriend on her own? By running off alone, she practically guarantees her own demise and completely separates herself from Clark, who in a state of sheer cowardice and panic doesn't even try to help or maintain visual contact. It was a wise choice not to run after her, but come on dude, you're the reason they're in this position in the first place. After Clark runs away from the scene of the attack, he starts loudly calling out for Kat. Clark, shut up. You know for a fact that a highly aggressive, auditory tracking monster is actively hunting you in these corridors. By screaming her name at the top of your lungs, you're literally making things as easy as possible for the creature to locate and murder you. Furthermore, the fact that Clark is comfortably moving around the halls while holding his camera proves he was perfectly capable of carrying it himself from the beginning. He could have gone down into the pit yourself instead of dragging innocent teenagers into this nightmare. Eventually, Clark ends up in a weird room with a lit Christmas tree standing completely alone in the yellow void. As he stands there staring at the creepy, mannequin-like still life figures, he actually utters the word hello. Imagine saying hello in a haunted yellow void while actively being hunted by a bloodthirsty beast. Who exactly are you expecting to respond to you, Clark? If there were a normal human in that room, they would have made themselves known the second you walked in. These mannequin-like, distorted copies of humans begin jerking and moving directly towards him. Fortunately for Clark, these Backrooms entities are incredibly slow and seemingly unserious. Seriously, how is Clark casually outrunning them every turn while stumbling around like a drunkard? He manages to escape again. Clark flees again, winding up in another room layout where he hears a familiar voice calling out to him through a wall. Now, I understand that hearing a familiar voice in a terrifying place is a major relief, but how are you letting your guard down so easily? You're in a dimension that actively distorts reality. Why would you assume that voice is real and safe when you know hostile entities are actively mimicking things and chasing you? Kat is actually on the other side of a wall. Kat can see Clark perfectly through a transparent section, but because of the physics of the Backrooms, Clark cannot see her at all. He's completely blind to her presence. Instead of attempting to carefully navigate the space, stay completely silent, or find a defensive position, Clark is totally exposed. He's just standing there, completely lost and vulnerable. The creature manifests out of the corridors, casually snatches Clark's camera right out of his hands, and closes in on him for the kill. Clark's complete lack of tactical awareness and his insistence on carrying a camera instead of a weapon finally catches up to him, leaving him entirely at the mercy of the entity. In the real world, Mary is at her office checking her answering machine. She plays a message from Clark, whose voice sounds entirely broken, hollow, and detached. He cryptically states that he won't be coming back, which instantly sparks deep worry in Mary. Meanwhile, Phil, the async scientist, is relaxing at home with his family. As he watches TV, a local commercial for Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire flashes across the screen. Phil looks at the screen, recognizes Clark's face from the classified Backrooms surveillance footage, and realizes that the civilian anomaly is directly tied to this specific local business owner. Driven by professional concern and a gut feeling that something is terribly wrong, Mary drives over to Clark's furniture store to look for him. She enters the building, finds it completely empty, and wanders down into the dark basement. She notices the marked out segment, steps right forward, and ends up crossing over into the back rooms. Seriously, what is up with people deciding to explore random, creepy locations they know absolutely nothing about? Mary is a trained therapist. She knows Clark was highly unstable, potentially violent, and claiming to see impossible spaces. Entering an unknown dimension completely alone with zero communication devices or emergency contacts is pure madness. Once inside, she wanders into a horrific room where the walls are completely covered in deeply disturbing, chaotic drawings. Suddenly, Clark steps out from the shadows. He looks completely emaciated and unhinged. She asks him where they are, and he replies that it's every place that ever was. Suddenly, they hear a sound. Clark tells her to stay calm as he slowly walks behind her. Before Mary can even react, Clark aggressively grabs her in a tight headlock and violently knocks her unconscious. When Mary finally wakes up, she discovers that Clark has dragged her body into a weird space that has been made to look like a perfectly normal residential dining room. Sitting around the table are the still life entities, grotesque, badly fabricated, motionless copies of human beings. Clark, completely detached from reality, tells Mary that everything existing inside the Backrooms is a twisted physical manifestation of something or someone that has been remembered by the universe. He walks over to the refrigerator, swings the door open, and reveals Kat's severed head sitting on the shelf. If that wasn't terrifying enough, Clark takes a knife and literally cuts off the scalp of the female still life entity sitting at the table. He's completely insane now, trying to force Mary to resume the toxic domestic marriage roleplay that they had been practicing in her therapy office. Mary refuses to play his twisted game. She looks him right in the eye and bluntly tells him that his real wife didn't leave him because of his drinking. She left him because he's an incredibly whiny, pathetic loser who refuses to take accountability for his life and blames everyone else but himself for his misfortunes. Now, I honestly don't blame Mary for letting her guard down at the very beginning of this encounter. Clark's someone she knew well and probably had absolutely no idea he would kidnap her in this weird, creepy place. But when she wakes up tied to a chair in that bizarre, simulated dining room, she makes a very questionable move. She starts aggressively scolding and insulting Clark, telling him his wife left him because he's a whiny, pathetic loser. Mary, you are currently tied to a chair, completely helpless, and sitting across from a mentally unstable, psychotic man who has a severed head of his employee in his fridge. Now is not the time to deliver a scathing psychological evaluation. She should have just played along with his roleplay to keep him calm until she could find a way to slowly untie herself. She's incredibly fortunate that Clark didn't just snap, go ballistic, and kill her on the spot, considering his mental state. She eventually manages to talk Clark into letting her go since he wants to remain in the back rooms and she doesn't. This causes the other still life to scatter since the main still life, the tall, monstrous being, is approaching. It takes the warped and deformed appearance of Clark as Captain Clark. Clark tries to speak to it like a friend, but the still life chomps into Clark's neck, killing him. I don't understand what kind of relationship Clark thought he had with this creature, but the fact that the other still life entities who don't even feel physical pain ran away in pure terror should have been his cue to bolt out of there. Instead, Clark walks toward it and thinks he can reason with this entity. As the monster attacks Clark, Mary takes advantage of the distraction and runs for her dear life. I give her points for not waiting for Clark to finish his conversation with the entity. She continues trying to untie herself even when Clark was trying to reason with the entity. I wish we actually saw what was left of Clark though. She sprints through the shifting architecture of the backrooms, which is now violently pulling data from her own psyche. The yellow hallways begin morphing into deeply unsettling, distorted versions of her own childhood neighborhood. She succumbs to the classic horror movie trope, the fall and crawl. She trips over some couches, sprains her ankle, and starts slowly crawling across the floor. Mary, now is absolutely not the time to be tripping. Enough of this trope. She manages to scramble up, and after squeezing through a claustrophobic, narrow gap in the walls, she enters a massive lobby. This has to be the single scariest room in the entire place. The pathways are incredibly thin concrete ledges, and below them is a massive pitch-black drop where you can't even see the bottom. How anyone with a fear of heights would cope in this room is beyond me. One wrong step and you are falling endlessly into the void. She opens a door and pops out into a perfect, eerie replica of the Captain Clark store's basement. As she navigates this terrifying space, she continues limping heavily. Now, unless she's just incredibly exhausted from all the running, she hasn't actually encountered any severe leg trauma that warrants its dramatic slowdown. She tries opening the front door but notices it's blocked by walls. The massive Captain Clark still life entity is right on her heels, its wooden limbs clicking loudly across the floor as it closes the distance. In a brilliant moment of quick thinking and pure survival instinct, Mary spots a heavy object, turns around, and smashes the entity's wooden leg, fracturing its support and severely crippling its mobility. We have to briefly acknowledge this as a fantastic tactical move that buys her crucial seconds. Unfortunately, the panic sets right back in. As she scrambles away from the monster, she gets incredibly clumsy again, tripping over a cardboard cutout and accidentally triggering a mechanical defense mechanism that floods the room with thick, suffocating gas. Mary, we need to be a little less clumsy under pressure. When you're running for your life, you have to watch where you're stepping, especially in a dimension known for having hazardous interactive props. By falling flat on her face and setting off the defense mechanism, she completely incapacitates herself. Dazed, disoriented, and choked by the fumes, Mary collapses onto the floor. She loses consciousness for a few moments, and when she finally opens her eyes, she's staring directly up into the horrifying, twisted face of the still-life entity leaning over her. Thinking fast, Mary reaches in her pocket and pulls out a heavy, jagged rock that she carries with her everywhere. This isn't just any stone. It's a literal piece of the concrete driveway from her childhood home, the exact spot where she had pressed her young hands into the wet cement before her life fell apart. She grips the rock tight and begins violently, repeatedly smashing it into the entity's face, and the heavy blunt force trauma completely dazes the creature, allowing her to escape. She runs away from the still life into a small opening, where scientists find her and pull her to safety. Mary is taken to an interrogation room at Async, where Phil meets her. He asks her to confirm what she saw, but she cannot even begin to explain it. She asks him what this place is and what will happen to her. We should briefly acknowledge this as a very smart, direct move. Instead of remaining passive and silent, she immediately demands answers about her status and the nature of the facility from the people in charge. Phil says their company used to make MRI machines, but after discovering the backrooms, they shifted their work and started trying to map it. He finishes by saying that decision is not up to him. As Phil keeps talking, his voice fades out, and Mary is left with a small smile as if she knows her fate is sealed. Back inside the backrooms, more spaces built from Mary's memories appear, including a still-life version of her sitting in the interrogation room. If there is one ultimate takeaway from this whole movie, let it be this. If a wall in your basement is leading you to another dimension, don't play Dora the Explorer. If you find the missing scientist badge, don't keep exploring. And if you somehow find yourself face to face with a 10-foot tall skeletal manifestation of your own deeply repressed psychological trauma, please, for the love of everything holy, do not try to give it a pep talk. Until next time, keep your head on straight and stay on this side of reality.